I'm so excited. I've got Nick Williams with me to have a conversation about the work that we were born to do. So he's a specialist. And I came across Nick. He's like this prolific author that I found many, many years ago. I think it was around the late 90s when I came across his book, The Work We Were Born to Do. And it was at the time when I was really looking into, what am I here for? What's my life about? What am I going to do so that I can make a difference? How do I make sure that my life doesn't pass me by? And also at the same time, have a real blast while I'm on the planet. So I came across Nick's book at the time. And Nick has, in the meantime, written many, many other books. How to Be Inspired, Powerful Beyond Measure, The Work We Were Born to Do, as I mentioned. But then he's got principles around it. Unconditional success and so on, and he coaches in this area. So let me bring Nick online. So Nick, I'm really grateful to have your time because I know you're really in demand, especially at a time now when so many people think, they want to do, like they're really engaged in the inquiry, self-inquiry of what am I here for? And, all the questions that I just mentioned. Let me ask you one question though. I think it's a fundamental question and really, I'd really like to hear what you have to say about it, which is that although you say that everyone has something that is, that they can do that would be useful to everybody else. Is that really true? Is it really true that we all have something within us that we can express into, if you like, turning into work?
Well, I think so, and I suppose it all comes down to what do we believe about life? Are we just here randomly? Are we just part of, some kind of molecular evolution that caused us to be here? So are we physical beings first, or are we spiritual beings, essentially, who are having a human existence? So, you can go either way. And a lot of people would argue that we are just a random kind of part of evolution. My argument would be, I don't think that's true. I think we're spiritual beings who are here for a reason at this time in humanity. Most of us have forgotten what that is, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a reason. So part of my kind of passion and part of my kind of mission, if you like, is just to put the idea out there and awaken people just to inquire into that possibility. So if I am a spiritual being here for a particular reason, what might that be? And how do I discover what that is? So yeah, I think we are. I think we do all have a purpose.
Now, in your view, of course, we know that fear stops us, right? So, internal dialogue, the fear, the mind monkeys, etc. But tell me more about specifically what you've discovered, like the 2 or 3 main things that people really struggle with in terms of their own mindset.
Well, in a way, you just raised the first one, which is a lot of people don't even think there was something they were born to do. So if they don't think there was something they were born to do, they won't even go looking for it in the first place. If they've never been exposed to that idea, then most people think that work, specifically is just something we do for money to survive and then maybe have some enjoyment in the rest of our lives. So the first one is not even believing we have something that we're here to do. Fear, especially fear around money. Okay, well, if there is something I was born to do, how is it ever going to support me? How am I ever going to make a living? Who's ever going to hire me to do it? All those kind of fears and concerns. And probably the biggest one for a lot of people is just a sense of self-worth. It's like, well, does that mean I'm special? And how do I make myself special? And, what's different about me to everybody else? And I don't think it's about being special. I think it's just about unwrapping the power of the soul that we all are, that we've all got a soul, and that's amazing. And that came with our creation. So just, that would be my quick answer to your question. Those are the 3 things. It's not knowing, fear, and not thinking we're significant, really. Who the heck are we? On the simplest level, there's a bit of divinity in everybody. And that pre-exists. And I think one of the big shifts I made maybe 15, 18 years ago was the difference between what I would now call self-improvement and what I now practice, which is much more self-acceptance. So I went on a self-improvement journey to start with at the beginning of my kind of, whatever you want to call it, kind of awakening or desire to be different. And I now realize that was an attempt to try and create a better version of myself. You know, I was trying to create a better image of who I was and see myself as more capable than I thought I was. So it was a kind of inflation of myself, if you like this image of me people might like and it might work in the world. But then there was always so much of me that I still didn't like and that I was, you know, trying to hide away and all that kind of stuff. So it was about a self-image. And for me, much more, it's about now this idea that there is a pre-existing self in all of us. There's a soul, an essence, a divinity, whatever language you use. To me, it doesn't matter what the language is. I love your idea of a diamond or a jewel in each of us. That's lovely. So our job is to unwrap what's already in us, not try and create a better version of who we already are. But I think actually self-improvement can be a fantastic distraction from realizing the diamond's already within us.
Yes.
It's like, well, I'll try and create a diamond rather than realizing you already are a diamond. You know, I wrote The Work We Were Born to Do 17 years ago now. About 17 years ago. It's been out 16 years. And I would now much more probably talk about, it's the idea of actually who we were born to be. It's like unwrapping the essence of who we are and expressing that through the work that we do. So I think, you know, what I've seen, and I probably got caught up in it myself, like I've got to discover what it is, and it's something outside me. There's some work that I've got to create or discover, rather than realizing it's about discovering who we are and expressing that through whatever we do.
Yes.
And I think the essence of all of us is ultimately love, and it's, you know, spirituality, it's beauty, it's creativity, you know, the spiritual powers within all of us. So, you know, where I think that can bridge the gap is that if that's who we really are, then we can bring that to exactly the situation we're at now, whether we're running a corporation, whether we're working on a supermarket checkout, whether we're a road sweeper, whatever we're doing now, we can use that to uplift the world, if you like. So, you know, I tend to think of it now as there's like our earthly job description, and then there's our spiritual job description.
Oh, I like that.
So, you know, most of us think in terms of our earthly job description. You know, I'm a banker, or I'm a coach, or a writer, whatever it is. But I think we all share a spiritual job description, which is to use whatever we're up to in the world to inject some more love into the world, inject some more creativity, to somehow inspire people, to make people feel better about themselves. And I think any work can be used to do that.
Interesting. So that's where I think the word calibration, like my printer was trying to do earlier, comes in for me. Is how do you calibrate the person who's down here, who's walking around, who's got the thoughts, you know, and who actually feels to a large extent, you know, disconnected from the place of what we're talking about, you know, that diamond, that place of, you know, oneness, you know, that essence of who we truly, truly are. So do you have any particular things that you recommend in terms of getting into being able to calibrate more often with that aspect of who we are?
Yeah, well, I suppose what I would suggest is that, or my belief is that deepest part of us, that pre-existing self, is always trying to get our attention.
Yes.
You know, it's not kind of, you know, off with the fairies somewhere. It's not in another realm of consciousness, or where it is, but it's constantly speaking to us. So one of the first things is to be willing to listen. And I think what I've seen is, you know, so many people over the years I've met who've decided what it is that they think they should be born to do and gone off and done something, which somehow left out that real deep inner listening, to see what your soul was actually prompting you to do. It's like, well, I'll decide I'll do this, rather than acting on, you know, inspiration or intuition. So one of the ways I get people to calibrate is to ask themselves, what do they feel inspired to do? Because I think one of the most direct routes to listening to our soul, if you like, is to ask ourselves what inspires us, because the true meaning of inspiration is in spirit, inspire. So, yeah. So what inspires us is usually our soul speaking to us, in my experience. And again, what happens in my experience is when people get inspired, they often freak out a bit, going, I could never do that. That's too big. That's too scary. You know, I'm not up to that. I'm not capable. I'm inadequate. You know, all the ego shenanigans then creep in, which I call resistance. So, you know, you've heard me talk about this, that, you know, I invite people to listen to and trust their inspiration. But I also get them to realize that their inspiration is also going to stimulate a lot of resistance in them.
men and women are put together slightly differently, so the internal dialogues are a bit different. They may have a slightly different flavor. I think a lot of women I know, the question is like, who am I to,
who do I think I am?
Who do I think I am, and so that's one key area. Any main, like any other big things that you've come across that stop people in terms of
well, like we've talked about, well, where do we find what we were born to do? So I often say number one is through what most inspires you. Secondly would be through your greatest resistance. Often what we were born to do is the thing we keep telling ourselves we couldn't do or terrifies us. And then another form of resistance, a specific kind of form of resistance, I call it living a shadow life. So I'll just talk for a minute about that, because people watching this, one way of getting to what you were born to do is to look at where you naturally gravitate towards, but you still sometimes hold yourself back, or maybe you hold yourself back quite a bit. So, for example, one of the kind of theoretical examples I give is like, maybe in your heart you want to write a book. So you go and work in Waterstones in Piccadilly, that's the biggest bookstore in Europe. You get to be surrounded by books, you get to meet people that love books, you get to meet a few authors, and you get your books at a discount. So on one level, you're living the dream because you're surrounded by what you love. But on the deepest level, you haven't shown up to write your own book, but you've been drawn to your own creative area. And, my version of that was, many people might know Alternatives, which is the London premier Mind, Body, Spirit platform that's been going for over 30 years now. And I was involved for over 20 years. And for a few years, it really felt great to be involved in that, because I was drawn to being involved with the world of personal spiritual development. It felt like my home. But then I began to get a bit bored and frustrated. And I was kind of giving myself a hard time going, well, what's wrong? I'm living the dream. I'm meeting all these amazing teachers and leaders. And then it wasn't until I was reading a book by Julia Cameron called The Artist's Way, and she was talking about this idea of a shadow artist. And I had what I euphemistically call a no shit moment, where I suddenly had this moment of awareness, which is, I don't want to be the one organizing the talks anymore. I want to be the one giving the talks. I don't want to be putting on talks for authors. I want to be an author. And it was like, aha, oh no, how could I ever do that? Who am I to do that? So, the significance of what I'm saying is to invite people to think about what's their shadow life. Where do they keep gravitating towards, but they go, oh, I could never do that. I could never do that. Yes. That's a really fruitful place for a lot of us to look. Or what are we keeping as a hobby that could actually be what we're on earth to do?
When I was writing, my specific set of writing sort of emerged from my own experiences and from the things that I was very integrated within myself, right? So it's as if there's like this weave of the things that you're really good at within you, what you call you, and the person who shows up and goes and does stuff in the world. And you think, yeah, but why would anybody be interested in this? Is like, it's obvious, isn't it? And it took me many, many years to come to the realization that what's obvious to me is because it's integrated so well within me. And the same with everybody else, that the things that are so integrated within us, we do so well, they don't occur like something special. But it's not the case that everybody is good at the same thing, but they may want to be, And the question is, how do you then share? How do you, the first thing is to become aware that there are certain things that you do really well, and it takes humility rather than arrogance to acknowledge that.
Yeah, well, depending on who I'm working with and how courageous I think they are. One exercise I often set coaching clients is to do a little survey, if you like, and go to 6 or 8 people they know, like, and trust in their vicinity and say, what do you think I'm naturally good at? What do you see me at my best as being? And often the results, when people have the courage to ask the question and listen to the answers, they're often astonished, because what they think they're good at isn't what other people necessarily see them being brilliant at. You're right. One of the things I talk about a lot is we miss what comes easily to us or naturally to us. And both we miss it and we don't necessarily value it. And I talk about the other side of that being, we value what involves difficulty, struggle, sacrifice, and suffering. Those tend to be the things that we value. You know, most people get certificates and medals for suffering and struggling and sacrificing themselves. Generally, we don't give out medals and honours for people that naturally did things easily.
Yes.
You know, we don't value that so much. So you're really right to raise this. So number one, you're right. You know, learn to see what comes naturally to us, what flows from us without us even to some extent trying, and see that that's valuable to other people, and believe that you can make a living out of doing what comes naturally to you. But what I found with a lot of people, and I've had to overcome this myself, is often we feel guilty about having things be too easy.
Given that there are certain things that all of us are inclined to be inherently, integrated with in terms of skill, talent, or a way of being, or something, that we bring, it leads me on to talking about purpose versus goals. So, in your line of work, and in the context of how you talk about work that you were born to do, are you saying that that's the same thing as purpose?
Yeah, I think there's a big overlap. So I think, yes, that yes, they're very similar, if not the same thing. And I guess, this is just my take, and I'm not saying this is the whole answer, but I think our purpose is actually very simple. Our purpose is to restore this world to love. That's it, I think. I think that's why we're all here. Because this is such a fear-based world on the whole. There's so much fear, there's so much attack, there's so much stuff, going on, that each of us have made a promise that we would bring a bit more love to this world. I think that's a purpose we all share. How we do that, each of us, as you say, have natural gifts and abilities to do that. So some of us will do it through writing, some through speaking, some through being a parent, some by being a politician or a community leader. All of us have different ways that we can express that love in the world. Some of us will be healers or therapists or whatever. So to me, again, it's not about the earthly job description, it's about the spiritual job description. So, I'm not saying I'm there all the time, and I can forget this very easily, but, when I get lost or I get busy or whatever, it's like, hang on, what am I really about? I'm here to be more loving. Usually that has to start with myself. I can be so tough on myself still, like we all can. So, in order to be able to share more love in the world, for most of us, it starts with us. Most of us have got levels at which we're not kind to ourselves, that we're tough on ourselves, that we beat ourselves up for stuff. So to me, part of my spiritual journey, a big part of it is learning to love myself more and forgive myself for the mistakes I think I've made in the past. And then the kinder I am to myself, the more I'm able to be kinder to other people. So I'm a great believer that the world's a mirror. My job isn't to stop the terrorists out there. My job is to stop terrorizing myself.
Tell me your point of view about purpose, goals, in that context.
Yeah. Well, the way I tend to operate, and I'm not saying this is true for everybody, but the way I tend to operate is I feel like I'm always being given kind of inspired instructions.
I like that. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah. So I tend to think of those now. I tend not to use the word goals so much. I tend to think of projects. So it's like, okay, this is the next project I feel like I'm being invited or asked to bring into the world. And sometimes I don't even know why I'm being asked to bring it in, but it feels like this is what I'm being asked to bring into the world. So that might be a book, or it might be a program, or it might be a conversation, or, I'm getting more into doing daily videos myself now. So I just feel like I just do that inner listening and say, well, what does the inspiration, what does my guidance seem to be asking me to do next? What projects want to exist? So I personally love the idea that, we're kind of, part of our job here is to be, the expression I use is servants of the greater mystery, or portals in time. So there's a realm of consciousness where things exist as pure potential, and our job is to make them exist in this realm as books or projects or programs or whatever they're going to be.
Manifested entities, in a sense.
Yeah, so to exist in physical form in this realm of consciousness. So when I wrote The Work We Were Born to Do, for example, I was giving some talks on it, and I was doing workshops on it and coaching on it. But I had no idea whether anybody was ever going to be interested in it. But I felt really inspired to do it. And it was just an act of kind of love to spend 3 years writing a book, which I didn't know, A, whether I'd ever find a publisher for, and B, anybody would ever want to read. So to some extent, I think we have to act in faith. You know, we don't know what the reception is going to be.
Yes.
So I do believe, though, that what we're truly inspired to do will be the answer to some people's prayers.
Yes.
You know, so we'll enjoy the process of bringing that into existence. But once it's in existence, there'll be people that go, thank you for doing that. That's wonderful. You know, and like, I've met so many people around the world who said, oh, you know, I read your book and I changed my career. And I'm going, blimey, you know.
Yes.
I probably only know that much of the impact that one of my books has had. You know, so much of the impact I'll never even know. So there is that kind of mystery where, in a way, we're just invited to do things without attachment. And I think there's something in the Bhagavad Gita that says something like we're entitled to our labor, but not the fruits of our labor.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Just to finish up the conversation then, I want to speak to two groups of people that I know, you know, often may feel like they've been cheated in life because they don't have the luxury of what we're talking about, you know, feeling that, oh, you know, yeah, it's great if you have the money and, you know, you can stay at home and you can do what you love to do. It's all great. But actually, no, I want to speak to two groups of people. You mentioned them earlier, actually. One of those people that are working, let's say, in jobs which require them to get up early in the morning, go to work, do repetitive things, and then come home, you know, and it's like, you know, what did I do today? So it could be anything, you know, it could be working in an office, or, you know, in a supermarket, or it could be somebody who's a programmer who, you know, who feels that they're constrained with their work. Or then there are those people that work in, you know, really exciting roles in corporates and, you know, or in other types of work, lines of work, which they fundamentally enjoy. But actually, it's as if I'm doing this just for the money. Speak to that for a second in terms of bringing in the context of loving what you do. You talk about doing the work that you were born to do.
Sounds like a big question.
I want to talk to loving what you do inside of that, you know?
Yeah. Well, like I've said, you know, I touched on it earlier, you know, I think we can use whatever we do as a form of devotion, if you like, as a way of, as a vehicle for expressing some goodness. So whether we're cleaning somebody else's office or running a company, we could still use that and to somehow uplift the world. And I think that what tends to happen then is, if we do what's in front of us well, we'll then graduate to the next step. Whereas I think what happens is a lot of people are resentful about what's in front of them. Sometimes very understandably. So, you know, I'm not saying they shouldn't be, but, you know, who's going to give you an opportunity if all they see is you being resentful? So there's something about doing things willingly without being a martyr and without being a doormat, but willingly do things, do them to the best of your ability. And in my experience, you tend then to graduate to doing something that's more you.
Yes.
But it, you know, I spent quite a few years thinking, well, you know, when my boss appreciates me, then I'll do a better job. And it was like, no, it doesn't quite work that way around. When I do a better job, my boss will appreciate me.
Or maybe he won't, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because the point is, it's a choice you're making. You're empowered to do it. He may never appreciate you because that's the kind of person he is. It's just not what he does, right? So, but that doesn't mean that what you do cannot be. I heard somebody say on one of the videos earlier today, I loved it, but we can close with that. It's like, don't wait for somebody to crown you. You go crown yourself, girlfriend.
Yeah.
I think that's lovely.
Choose yourself, you know. One of the expressions I use is, like, I call it commissioning ourselves. It's like, you know, be the CEO of ourselves, you know, say, this is how I choose to be. And that does require moving out of feeling a victim. And, you know, many of us do have an investment. You know, I've certainly at times had a really big investment in feeling a victim and wanting to blame.
Yeah, that's a whole other question.
Yeah, I think the big thing for many of us is that real willingness to take responsibility.
Yes.
And say, you know, yeah, I can do something here.
Absolutely.